Welcome to this Gonzo Ethnography of academic authority, which collects a number of processes which I experienced at Princeton University, which concluded with my dismissal from the faculty, and which I believe to be relevant as an ethnographic analysis of academic authority in 2021. While the Princeton case is probably extreme and cannot be simply extrapolated, I believe that the processes that I will describe here are representative of concerns that affect the activities of producing knowledge today in the age of post-truth, populism, identity politics, political correctness, and other contemporary cultural phenomena. I would like now to start sharing some of the slides that I prepared to explain this first session. I believe that the reason why I believe it is important to make this ethnography is because I think that the role of universities has been crucial to the emergence of some of these phenomena, which have had a fundamental role in shaping, universities have a fundamental role in shaping the truth and the moral standards and the culture of an era. And I believe that the contemporary culture has been developing within the academic culture for some decades already. And that's what motivates this exercise, which is structured as a seminar in 7 sessions that address different aspects of the processes that I experienced and that refer to a document which I will make available, publicly available, with the evidence that give account of these processes. I will, so this is a very large document which collects a number of processes and complaints which I raised within the university and that describe the practices that happen on different levels of the Princeton structure. This is a synthetic diagram of these processes involved through the different stages of it, which explain the different agents that take, the actions, the bodies within Princeton which were engaged through the processes. And you can see in the diagram that there are authority lines, which are basically the blue ones, that describe the direction of authority, but there are also challenges of authority. There is hostile actions, there are enforcement actions, and so on and so forth. And we will go through different aspects of this diagram through these different sessions. The process encompasses a vast variety of actors, which I believe engage in deceitful, dishonest, improper behavior, and are shielded systematically from scrutiny by opaque practices, committees, and other mechanisms that the university has in order to enforce authority, and which in some cases do not affect only administrative processes, but also purely academic considerations, such as, for example, the qualification of knowledge and expertise. There is a disturbing pattern of cover-ups between the different agents for the purpose, I believe, to support authority at any expense. There are many agents through the process, and we will see them through. So this session is dedicated to the authorities, and the authorities that I would like to describe first are my authorities, the authorities that are theoretically in the background of this seminar. The first one is Nietzsche's genealogy of morals, because I think it is important when considering moral questions in respect to regimes of power. The second one that I would like to mention is Hannah Arendt's idea of the banality of evil as an important reference in the discussions that I would like to raise with these seminars, and which describe certain behavior where moral consciousness is suspended in favor of authority and consensus. I think it is a rather interesting concept when considering the formation of academic consensus, and we will see that appearing time and again through this process. There is obviously a relation to Foucault's Power and Knowledge as a reference that talks about the correlation between regimes of power and systems of knowledge, and that is particularly relevant to the universities and to the construction of truth. I would also make some references to Daniel Dennett's, particularly his critique of postmodernism as the ideology of science denial and alternative facts. And finally, there is a depth with Bruno Latour's concern with the university as a machine to create alternative truths and the role of the critical thinking in that respect. And obviously in that diagram that you just saw, there is a reference to his methodologies of the actor network theories, etc., etc. Now, I would like to now talk about the authorities that I encounter through this process. The first one that I encounter is Elizabeth Diller, who is a long-term professor at the School of Architecture, and she's also a leader in the business, but unfortunately not one that I am ready to follow. I believe that she really has the will to power, and the conflict that starts the process is my challenge to her authority to interfere with the thesis of my thesis advisee on a systematic level, and to rule over the assignment of these advisees and get exclusive credit for the thesis scores at the expense of all the other advisors. She has been running this thesis model for over a decade in the School of Architecture. Basically, when I was dean of the school, I terminated the system, but when I stepped down, the system was magically reinstated, and so then I decided that I was not willing to accept that her interference with my advisees. And so obviously she then liked that, and the conflict went up to higher authorities, and we will see how these concerns expand and derive into collateral processes, and go all the way up to the president and to the trustees of the university, who finally signed my dismissal from the faculty. Okay, the next authority in line is Guy Nordenson, the structural engineer and the most senior faculty in the technology subsector in the school, who blocks one of my seminars, the Envelope Seminar, from becoming a technology elective because allegedly it lacked technical content. That is quite peculiar, since he himself teaches interpretation and meaning in his technical seminars. I'm not joking here. He is really the epitome of the postmodern engineer who is interested more in interpretation than in evidence, I believe. We will talk about this story further in another session, But what I think is interesting about this is that the committee he heads does not need to explain its decision, and in fact is deliberately instructed not to do so. It is the best example I know of academic authority in its purest state. The committee is also composed by him and two assistant professors, and he hides his hand behind them and behind the code of silence that was imposed on the committee by the dean, instead of arguing publicly the decision, and I believe cowardly. I think he simply acts like that because he is supposed to be the technical authority. The second authority to which the controversy is raised is Mónica Ponce de León, Dean of the School of Architecture, and also an architect herself. Mónica Ponce de León is the main target of my complaints because I claim that she developed a hostile environment strategy towards me. But not only that, I think that there are other things that I question about her behavior, which is that she actually tends to lie very often and in writing, and there is evidence of that in the document that I am going to be referring to, although I'm not going to talk specifically about that. Whoever is interested can look at the document in more detail. But also, I think it's important to mention that she has installed herself in the world of identity politics as a woman of South American origins, and that she is capable of the most ruthless deployment of affirmative action. In Nietzschean parlance, she is a master of the weaklings, as you can see in this example, which was reported by the Boston Globe on December 1st, 2010, over the acrimonious split between her and her former business partner, where when she used her 51% of her majority stake in the company to change the locks of the company and cut him off from the server. What is interesting is that this 51% was not necessarily her contribution to the company, but simply small majority share that the two partners agreed in the statutes of the company in order to make the company female-owned and therefore benefit from certain aspects of the positive discrimination policies that exists towards female-owned companies in the United States. Very quickly, Paul Lewis, associate dean, and therefore deeply involved with the policies and the politics of the dean, lower profile figure, which becomes nonetheless involved in some dubious actions as the driving force of the thesis assignment committee. He's also a former student and employee of Elizabeth Diller, and he is effective and hardworking and collaborative and correct. He's a perfect committee man, a perfect Eichmann, if in the kind of reference of Hannah Arendt. The next authority that I find in this progressively higher level of authority is Tony Turano, who is a long-term administrator at the dean of the faculty. And despite her administrative role, primarily administrative role, is someone who has clearly, who enjoys the authority of her position and is prepared to do almost anything to defend the authorities in the university. And over this person, we will see her entering into conflict of interest, manipulation and withholding of evidence, rubber stamping of false evidence, construction of scapegoats. She is an agent that is basically an example of this sort of autocratic behavior that I will criticize through the different sessions in the seminar, and which always refers back to authority as the ultimate reason for her actions. There are some citations of my correspondence with her that give account of this approach. The next authority in this chain of command is Sanjeev Kulkarni, the dean of the faculty and a professor of electrical engineering who went up in the university ladder. I believe that he made a fundamental mistake by failing to investigate and act when I raised my complaint against the thesis procedures at the School of Architecture in 2018, and trusted Deputy Dean Turano and Mónica Ponce de León instead of taking action, despite the fact that I believe that he was well aware that the protocols were entirely inappropriate. I don't think he is someone who likes conflict, and so he entrusted other people to bring me into submission, but became progressively embroiled into an increasingly complex process through which I believe he abandoned all his moral principles and beliefs, squeezed between President Gruber and Mónica Ponce de León. So he failed to investigate my complaint, hosted a corrupt disciplinary investigation against me, accepted to review a complaint where he was a defendant, issued a non-communication orders against me, and signed a very damning recommendation letter from my dismissal, which I believe is pure slander, as we will see in some of the sessions. It is interesting that a few days after signing his recommendation for my dismissal, he resigned himself from his position as dean of the faculty. I don't know to what degree the two events are connected. I would like to think that they are connected in some way. There is an interesting authority here, which we will see repeatedly, which is a choral one, is what is called the Committee of Conference and Faculty Appeal, which is supposed to act on behalf of the whole of the Princeton faculty as an appeal body against decisions that from the administration that are unfair, and their decision is not binding. It's a rotating committee, so it doesn't hold executive power, but I believe their behavior, which results of always in some sort of unanimous decision in support of the authority, despite the fact that I am sure that all these professors are well aware of the dubious stance of some of the actions that I appealed against. I mean, this is a very clear example of group thinking and this kind of desire for convergence and harmony that often drives academic consensus, but as Hannah Arendt says in her Banality of Evil, sometimes it is done so at the expense of the individual consciousness about what is being decided. Finally, or nearly finally, the process reached to President Gruber, although I think he had been aware of this for a long time, and I believe there is evidence of it in some of the documents that I include in the reference document. Christopher Gruber is a lawyer. He was a provost for 10 years before becoming the president, so he's also a ladderman. And I am obviously not a great fan of him, and that is mainly because I believe his tenure is driven by the prioritization of politics over academic interests, and that is probably consistent with his career as a university administrator. I do not think that he qualifies as a great leader, but is more someone who, again, is a kind of committee person who has risen to the top. I think what is interesting about President Gruber, or what is he's most famous for, is the cancellation of Woodrow Wilson in 2020, which famously attracted a Trump tweet. But this is part of a longer process that started already in 2015, when his office was occupied by a group of Black activists called the Black Justice League. Basically, eventually he resisted their demands to cancel Woodrow Wilson in 2015, and set up committees and tried to kind of push back. But eventually, in the wake of the George Floyd riots in 2020, he finally decided to cancel Woodrow Wilson and engage into a kind of mea culpa tirade, which would have delighted Pascal Bruckner and his tyranny of guilt, in which he stated that Princeton was a racist organization, which obviously triggered Trump's education department to start an investigation about racism in Princeton, in order to suspend potentially federal funding to an institution that declares itself racist. But more interestingly, he also came forward after Professor Joshua Katz wrote a piece in an online magazine called Quillette, criticizing a faculty letter that a large amount of Princeton faculty wrote over the George Floyd riots, making demands to curb racism in the university, and asking for summer salary to faculty of color, and to the installation of a committee that will supervise all publications of Princeton faculty to ensure that they are not racist. So it was not only President Gruber, but a large reaction against Professor Katz ensued. His publication and his own Department of Classics published a statement disowning him. But what is more interesting about this process is that the president waded into the fray and made a public statement admonishing Professor Katz publicly, and even threatening him with consequences. And then there was a wider public backlash against President Gruber, which was criticized for becoming the police of free speech. He had to pull back. The Department of Classics was forced also to withdraw their statement against Professor Katz, and therefore Professor Katz was saved from cancellation, or that's what he thought. He claimed that he survived cancellation in Princeton, but just a few months later, in the Daily Princetonian, there were some allegations about inappropriate conduct with female students from Professor Katz, levied by some friends of a woman who was allegedly involved a few years back. The woman in question has remained silent. So this was a real hit job and kind of character assassination for his declaration of independence. And I think that it is, I bring it here because I think it's interesting how racial identity and gender identity work sometimes together in this growing politics of identity that are taking over the university, and that often operate in this kind of mafia like manner. We will also see in some of the episodes in my process the application of codes of silence and withholding of evidence, and a number of things that I think are related to this mafia behavior. But going back to President Gruber, he also left his footprint in the institution by changing the motto of the university. In 2013, it was one of the first things that he did in his tenure, and that gives you a certain idea of his concerns. So to the motto of Princeton, which was already modified, interestingly, by Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson said Princeton in the nation's service. And then, as you can see, President Gruber added to that, and the service of humanity. In 2015, 2 years later, Princeton lost major lawsuits trying to get tax exemption for municipal taxes. And there was also caught in 2017, 4 years later, after changing the motto, investing money in the Cayman Islands. And there were other universities in the US that were caught doing the same thing. But obviously, nobody else had made such high-minded commitments to humanity. So that gives you a certain idea of the double morale that is at play here in this at this particular time in Princeton University. And finally, we will see a kind of short episode because my dismissal cannot be signed by the president. The president makes the recommendation after a long, lengthy process, but the people who sign my dismissal are the trustees, who are legally responsible for this type of decisions in the university. And I think it is very interesting to look at the composition of the board of trustees of Princeton, photographed here. There's an executive committee that you can see there above, and you can see the type of people that are actually eventually taking responsibility for my dismissal. I don't think that they have obviously had a deep involvement in the process, but I'm sure the Princeton lawyers have looked at the evidence, and I think it is interesting. But I bring them here because I think it's interesting to see the nature of the of these individuals, beyond the the people on the upper level, which are the executive committee, which I actually met them online and explained to them my concerns about what is happening in the university. But you can see Turner Broadcasting Corporation, major executives, chief executive officers of many investment banking corporations, deans of the Yale Law School, Credit Suisse, Fannie Mae, Capital Research and Management Company, the president of Microsoft, Congresswoman for Alabama, etc., etc. I think we will talk a little bit about my encounter with these individuals in the last session, and that obviously had to, I guess, decide between firing me and firing the president, who was putting in front of them, I think, a deceitful recommendation letter for my dismissal. Anyway, we'll talk about this. There is a kind of long process that I would like to explain through these 7 sessions, and I hope that this introduction would have trigger some curiosity for you to look at some of these other sessions of the seminar. Thank you.